self-defense discussion. I'm talking about how I would learn martial arts if I had to start over. And I've been thinking about this question a lot for two reasons. One, as I have kids who are getting older and need more practical self-defense for two different reasons. So we have to separate fighting. You know, what happens on the play, not on the playground. We're not allowed to fight on the playground. But what happens, after school, street fights, all other altercations like that. So not life or death situation, ego is involved. And thinking back to when I was a kid, if I were a kid and I was starting over and I knew then what I know now, being old and having a lifetime of experience, what would I do differently? How would I go about learning self-defense? And so I had to kind of separate that and think about it in two ways, because people, I think we all think kind of alike at the beginning, where we think of karate, martial arts, boxing, fighting, and self-defense. We think of it all as one thing. And what I've learned over a lifetime is that they're not. They're completely separate things, and they both have a place and a purpose, and there's value in both. So there's a need for real practical self-defense against a bully, against somebody trying to hurt you, trying to beat you up. When you're thrown into a situation, or maybe your mouth gets you into a situation where you have to physically defend yourself. And is that the same thing as a life or death situation? And of course it's not. You can't treat them the same. So I do want to separate those two things. I'm going to talk about those two things. So I want to think about, like, if I were going back and I was starting over as a kid, or if you're a younger person, you're thinking about getting into self-defense, what would you do? And Garrett brings up a good question. What style of martial arts is your favorite? So we're going to go over all that, Garrett. That's what this discussion is all about. And so the second thing that I'm thinking about for myself, and for maybe possibly some of you, is as I get older and I run into real physical limitations, I'm facing another hip replacement, and my right hip is killing me. I can't sleep at night. It's to the level that my left hip was before I had the hip replacement, where I'm limping all the time, where I'm forcing myself to still work. I have to work, I have to do things. And so my job forces me, or requires me to do it right, because I could probably cheese out and hide somewhere and sit, and I won't. But I'm gonna be up on my feet, and I'm gonna walk constantly, patrolling and looking for things. It's a security situation at a school, so I'm looking for keeping people safe. And so that means I'm gonna be physically active, and I'm gonna do my job. I'm gonna be able to run. I'm gonna force myself to run. And so I test myself during the week. So all that extra running and walking just keeps it inflamed. And there are things that I do that kind of help that inflammation. But once I have the hip replacement, which will happen probably later in the year when I have a little time off, I know when I come out side of it, that's going to feel good. Like it does. Like my left hip, I had it replaced. It feels like, a new person over here. Over here, I feel like I'm 100 years old. So I'm thinking about, when I get back into a place where I don't have the same physical limitation, how do I reconnect with self-defense? Michael says ozone injection works in some joints. Michael, heard that for sure. And trust me, I'm willing to try anything and everything. And I've tried so many things in the past on the other side. And Garrett says, have you seen old people still staying in self-defense depending on whatever their age? Yes, absolutely, Garrett. That's a great point. This is why I don't whine and complain about it. I maybe do a little bit more than I realize. But I have worked with people with real physical challenges 10 times what I'm experiencing now. And I see them push ahead and still continue to improve their fitness, their ability to physically and practically, in a real way, defend themselves. So I know it's possible. I watch people do it all the time. And I'll never put any limitations on myself, because I'd never put any limitations on you. Because as I would say to you in person, if we were training together, no matter what your challenges are, you might be confined to a wheelchair. You might not have the ability to lift your arms above your shoulders. Those are real limitations that some people face. And so I would say to you and to myself, I don't know what you can do. You don't even know. Only God knows. And so let's not set limitations on it. Let's work together and train and see what we can do. And then we find things that work, and then we start to move forward and make progress a little bit at a time. Let me see if I can keep this chat on here. Hello to everybody who's in the chat. For some reason, this format, when I go vertical or horizontal, the chat kind of disappears, and I don't see it. It pops up for a second and then it's gone. But hello, I think it was Kat. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you guys in the chat. So anyways, the question is, if I had to start over, knowing what I know now, how I would learn martial arts or how I would learn self-defense now, knowing what I know, if I had to start over. And so in one way, I really am starting over after I go through these physical changes and I get my hip replaced and I can get back into training the way I really want to train, because I'm really limited with what I can do. I'm limited in how high my leg will go. I mean, that's a real thing. It won't go on this side. I'm getting all my flexibility back. Before I had the hip replacement, I couldn't lift my leg above like 6 inches. And I've always been able to, as younger, up until maybe 5 years ago, I could do any kick, every kick that I was asking anybody else to do: spinning kicks, jump kicks, flipping kicks, everything that you see in certain styles of like Taekwondo, some karate, some things like that. Not that those are self-defense, but my point is we had all the physical ability. Gareth says his opinion is exercise, running, track, stretching, lifting weights, staying in shape. Yeah, no matter what your age. So that's part of this discussion. And I encourage you, especially in the comment section, because the chat will disappear after a while. The comments will stay with this video for a long time. And I really want this to be a discussion where we get together, and my opinion is just my opinion. It doesn't make it right or wrong. My experience doesn't make it better than your experience. It's just how I see it. If I had to start over again, and if I had to learn self-defense again, starting over, what would I do? So going back to the first question is, if I were a kid and just starting out, when I was 9, I started in Judo, which I think was a great foundation for multiple reasons. One, it was great exercise. 2, there's a good foundation there where you have the structure and self-discipline. You can't teach someone self-discipline, but you can put them in a disciplined structure, and then they can apply themselves and become more self-disciplined. So I had that, the mental training that goes along with Judo, the philosophy, all the good stuff that's in there. And physically, they're really good moves. You'll learn how to take somebody down, and you learn how to fight when you're on the ground. So that's a big part. If I were starting over, and then I got into traditional karate, Taekwondo, spent years and years doing all the Korean styles, the Hapkidos, been surrounded by it, learning all the traditional things in there, and then learning some of the Japanese styles of traditional karate, and played around with the Aikido and all these other styles. And then Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came around. I wrestled in high school, and so thinking about those, if I were giving advice to my younger self and I wanted to be able to physically defend myself in not a life and death situation, but more what we worry about when we're that age, which is somebody's gonna fight me after school, right? And that happened many times. I had 4 brothers growing up. That was probably the best self-defense training that any person can ever have, is being in the middle of 4 brothers and getting picked on and beat up. I'm not saying that it was the right way. I'm just saying that was the way that we learned. And of course, my brothers could fight, so I grew up fighting. We always fought in our neighborhood, and so there was a lot of fist fights. There wasn't life or death stuff, but there was a lot of kind of fighting. Yeah, Doug says he would forget his martial arts training. Zandi says, hard for me. I always had a desire, but never had the time. Now he's 54 and battling cancer. So that brings me to the second part of the conversation, which we're going to talk about for sure. But going back to my younger self, maybe for some of you who are younger, if I had to do it again, knowing what I know now, I would learn boxing first. And I came into boxing a little bit later, after I wrestled, after I had done martial arts for many, many years, and especially in Taekwondo. And Taekwondo back then had a lot more punches. Taekwondo now has nothing. In fact, and I'm not gonna be mean, Garrett says he won 2 Tiger Kim's Taekwondo, and I'm just gonna throw this out there because I know there's like 13 or 14 Tiger Kims across the country, and I just know that because I've probably been in more martial arts schools than maybe a handful of people. There are probably a handful of people in the whole country who teach marketing or something like that that maybe have visited more martial arts schools than I have. But there was a period in my life, about 2 years, where every weekend I visited multiple martial arts schools in different cities to try to understand the industry and try to learn. And so I've seen so many. And the Tiger Kims, oh, there are a million Tiger Kims. And that's not a criticism. That's just a reality. You know, Tiger is a Korean animal, and Kim is a very common last name in Korea. So there are a lot of master Kims who go by Tiger Kim. There's also Tiger Schulman, which is a whole different beast, but that's Kyokushin karate, which is a different style altogether. But so anyway, getting back to what I would learn if I had to start over and I was a kid meaning tween, teen, worried about getting in fights after school, I'm needing to develop a voice, learn how to say, but you can't pick on me, you can't touch me, you don't have to like the way I look or sound, and you have to learn how to do that. You have to learn how to speak up for yourself, and then a lot of that bullying goes away just because of the voice. But the confidence comes from the training. That's just a reality that I've understood and learned, and that's been my experience. Being able to physically defend yourself gives you a lot more confidence when you look somebody in the eye and say, back up, get out of my face. You don't have to like me, but don't touch me. Don't call me that name. You know, stay away from me. And you know, there's a lot. Yeah, Garen says Pax, Master Pac was my first Korean. He was in the secret about a lot of those Koreans, especially of that generation. We would call them the Vietnam generation, because a lot of them came over in the late 60s and early 70s. It was a lot of the same time the guys were coming back from the Vietnam War. So there was super karate, Korean karate, Tang Sudo, Taekwondo came along probably after most of them. You got the Kuksulwans, Kuksuldo, Hwarangdo. You got all these different styles, all these different Korean names. But a lot of those styles, especially Tang Sudo is basically Shotokan karate, and you know came from the karate styles, and then the Koreans learned that, and then later they didn't want anything to do with the Japanese, so they came up with all kinds of different Korean names. And a lot of the old Tang Sudo schools that exist, they still have a lot of that old school fighting spirit. And some of the Budo schools, some of the traditional Japanese schools that hold true to the traditional martial, they still fight, right? And Kyokushin guys still fight. And it's not a criticism of any of the traditional martial arts, but I wouldn't do Taekwondo now to say, I wouldn't put my kids in Taekwondo at all. And that hurts. It doesn't hurt to say that, because I've felt that for a long time. And I've watched Taekwondo kind of become focused more and more on the competition. And the reason they become focused on the competition, in my experience, in my opinion, was because of the money involved at the highest level. And the saddest part of it was that the guys who were making those decisions, the Koreans at the top, at the world level, global level, were making all these decisions to try to make it more attractive, to pull advertising dollars, to keep it in the Olympics, to make it. And then it trickles down to the rest of the Taekwondo schools, and then all of a sudden they're starting flapping their front foot and smacking each other in the head, which is, it's still a sport, you know, it's exciting. It's kind of like fencing. It kind of lost its value as a martial skill and became more and more as like a competitive sport, where a lot of people get into Taekwondo when they see it, and you know, whether they call it Taekwondo or karate or whatever, parents are saying, so many parents said to me in the last 10 to 15 years, I want my kid to sign up. I want him to take classes from you because he's getting picked on at school, but I don't want him to become aggressive, or I don't want him to get kicked in the head. I don't want him to hurt anybody. I don't want him to, and I would always look at him thinking, what do you think this is? You know, this is fighting. That's what this is. It's what it's supposed to be. Martial arts was never designed for little children. It was never designed for 4-year-old black belts. That's not only as a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old even, black belt. And it's not that I haven't done it. I mean, I've never done the 4, 6, 8-year-old, but you know, I had a little bit older black belts. And they worked hard and they earned it back in the day. But these days, you see these kids get their black belt in a year at 4, 6, 8, and it's like it's an offense. It's offensive. It's ridiculous. It means nothing. And that's why I think that if you look at the industry, especially in the West, and if you go to Korea, Taekwondo is like a kiddie thing. The adults don't seriously do do it. Some do, but most don't. And we've done it to ourselves as an industry. But my point isn't that we've lost the value and that we're not doing hard things anymore and really training kids, because some of that does still exist. There are some that do exist like that. But Matt, it's good to see you. But the point is, what's practical and what would work, and what in my experience over years and years of sitting in my office across from two parents and a teenager who's a black belt of mine, and the parents just frustrated and angry, and the teenager crying or angry, and because they got beat up in school, and they're a black belt or a secondary black belt. They've been doing it since they were 4, and now they're 14 or 16. And the parents are like, well, how did he get beat up? I've been paying you, man. All these years, I watched him break the bricks. I watched him break the boards. I watched him flip and spin. And we went to the competition and he won the world championship. You know, the world championship of Toledo, world championship of Minster, world championship, because that's a big joke too. And I realized over time that, you know, most kids who are attracted to martial arts are good kids. They're nice kids who don't fight. That's just the reality. And they come up against somebody who's mean and aggressive and willing to smack them in the mouth, then sometimes they get punched in the mouth and they don't fight back, because in their head they think they're a deadly weapon, because we allowed them to believe that over all these years. So then what I did and shifted was starting doing more and more practical self-defense and more scenario training, and saying, okay, now this guy's in your face, he's smacking you around, what are you gonna do, right? You know how to knock people out. You knocked a guy out at the tournament last weekend. Knock him out, right? Knock his teeth down his throat. But they're not trained that way. But you can make some adjustments. So we started doing that, and that kind of solved that problem. And I started putting out teenage kids and adults who, if they had to, put their hands up, knuckle up, buttercup, and fight, they could do that and defend themselves. And then that becomes more effective. But if I were starting over, the biggest thing that I feel like we missed in traditional martial arts is we don't get punched in the face almost at all. You know, we get kicked in the head, we get knocked out. I've been knocked out so many times. But unless you start boxing, which is why I love boxing so much, and which why I box as an adult. Why, when we go back to the second part of my discussion, if I had to learn martial arts all over again, once my hip is fixed, how am I going to reconnect with practical self-defense in a way that keeps me sharp enough to protect myself and my family? I'm going back to the boxing gym, and I'm going to make sure that I have a mouthpiece, and I'll get some headgear, and I have all this stuff in the storage unit, and I'll have my boxing gloves, and I'll stand across from an old geezer like myself, or probably a younger guy, because a lot of old geezers won't do it, and I'll get pushed in the face, and I'll learn how to move my head with my body, and I'll learn how to keep my guard up, and I'll learn how to parry, and I'll learn how to hit him back at the same time while he's trying to punch me. And I'll be slower, and I won't be as effective, but I'll be defending myself in a practical way, and I'll get better. And my timing will get better, and my experience will get better. And the more I do boxing, and this has been true, and I know how to box, and I've been doing it for a long time, so it's not like something new that I'm doing. It's something I'm going to reconnect with. So if I were older, I am older, and I didn't have any experience, the first thing I would do is get into a boxing gym, and not a title boxing gym. Nothing wrong with title, it's a fun workout, but a boxing gym that's dirty and stinky and has old equipment, and all the kids training there are probably very poor, because that's who boxes. That's who is willing to get punched in the face. And I would go to that boxing gym, and you'd have to drive into a bad neighborhood, and you would have to drive to a place that you're not normally comfortable, and they might all speak Spanish. And so you might have to practice your Spanish a little bit to go in and sign up, and they might look at you kind of funny because you're the old geezer with all the kids, but you would be in a real boxing gym. So that's the first thing I would say, both for myself as a younger person and when I'm teaching my kids. We've got mitts, we've got gloves, we're gonna box in the garage, and you know they're gonna have to learn how to take a little bit and the nice thing about a good boxing gym is they're gonna ease you into that. So you're not gonna go in and just get punched in the face from the start. So in your experience and in your opinion, put it in the comment section below. That's the first thing that I would start with. I would start either learning self-defense for the schoolyard bully, after school fight, street fight. You know, you live in a bad neighborhood, you have to learn how to defend yourself. What do you think of boxing? That's where I would start. I would start with myself and I'd say, you're gonna learn how to box. And I was a poor kid growing up, so, but we didn't have any boxing. I lived out in the country. There was no, I didn't even know there was a boxing gym. If you went downtown where I lived, that's where Buster Douglas trained. Buster Douglas was learning boxing while I was learning judo. Buster Douglas was learning boxing while I was out in the sticks. I rode my bike 13 miles to get to the Taekwondo school. I was, and if you don't know who Buster Douglas is, he's the guy that knocked Mike Tyson down and knocked him out and showed everybody in the world that Mike Tyson wasn't invincible. So there was a time when everybody thought nobody could ever beat Mike Tyson. And then this big, frumpy, dumpy, he's big too, because I've met him many, many times. And super sweet guy, super kind guy, powerful, massive. His fists are like this big. But Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. Somebody that they thought, Buster Douglas is going to go down in the first round. I think he did go down in the first couple rounds. And I remember it was during Desert Storm, because I was in California. We were all watching it around the television, and it was in Tokyo. This was the fight. If you remember that fight, put that in the. It was an amazing fight. It wasn't the Rumble in the Jungle, but it was the first time Mike Tyson got knocked down and then got beat. And then after that, just like the 4-minute mile, people realize you can run faster than 4 minutes. Then people realized they could knock Mike Tyson out, and he lost all of his ability to browbeat people, and he still beat a lot of guys. But that and George Foreman coming back as an old man. George Foreman coming out of retirement as a 40-year-old father of 12 kids named George, with the Foreman grill and a big belly, and just knocking people out. Two really important in my life. Reasons why I box now. Because I realized that learning how to move, boxing teaches you how to take a punch, boxing teaches you how to deliver a punch, boxing will teach you how to knock somebody out if you get a good boxing coach. And those are all very practical self-defense skills. Now, the second part that I would teach myself as a young person, and this is something I naturally did. Like I said, my first martial art was judo. Judo is grappling. Judo is throwing. Judo is taking people to the ground. Judo is fighting on the ground. Biggest difference between judo and jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and we're not even going to talk about the Japanese jiu-jitsu, because I think, and there's nothing against Japanese jiu-jitsu, but I think it's like karate and boxing. Karate has punches, boxing, you're getting punched in the face. You're not getting punched in the face in a karate class. You're just not. And there are some hard-headed, crazy people out there punching each other in the face, and I'm thinking of certain people in my mind. But for the most part, most karate classes, Krav Maga falls right in there with great concept, great idea, hard training, but they're not punching each other in the face, and you're not learning how to do it in a practical, real-time way. So, and there are limitations of boxing too for self-defense, but that's where I would start. So if I had to learn self-defense again, going back, knowing what I know now, having the experience that I've had in my life as a young person, and where I'm headed, so my past and my future self, where I'm headed after I get my hip replaced and everything starts to work again, and I can start running again, and I can start doing all the things that I used to do. I'm not going back to the kicks. I'm not going to stretch myself. I'll stretch, I'll do all that stuff to keep myself healthy, but I'm not kicking anybody in the head anymore. And one of my favorite boxing gyms here in West Palm Beach, Mike Tyson shows up there and works out a lot, and so does Bill Superfoot Wallace. Bill Superfoot Wallace, when I was a kid, was my hero. And if you know anything about Bill Superfoot Wallace, he had a bad knee from judo. He started in judo, and he got into, I think, in the Navy, and then he got into kicking, and then he was on the circuit for years when kickboxing first became a popular sport in the United States, and they fought in Madison Square Garden. Chuck Norris was a kickboxer before he was an actor. Bill Wallace has been in movies with Bruce Lee. So Bill Superfoot Wallace, I'm sitting there boxing with my coach. We're working in a ring, and this old grizzled dude says, "Hey man, do you mind if I get a corner?" And I look over and I'm like, "That's Bill Superfoot Wallace." And I knew Bill Superfoot because I'm from rural Ohio, and he's from rural Indiana, just over the border from where I was. And when I was younger, we would go over to his tournaments all the time, and he would come over to our tournaments. So I knew him from back in the day when he still had a martial arts school, and he was still fighting. And now he lives down the street from me where I live now. Someone told me one time, when people retire, they don't move to Dayton, Ohio. They move to Palm Beach, Florida, or Florida or whatever. So anyway, so Superfoot, working out in the thing. So I got to talk to him a bunch of times. And one time I was talking to him, and he said, and we were talking about the hip replacement because I knew I was coming up for one. And everybody I've known who've had a martial arts school for as long as I have, or for half as much as time, they all have had their hips done. They've all had hip replacements in their 30s, almost all of them in their 30s. And I don't know when he had his done the first time. And I made it to 53 before I had my hip done. So yay, I made it. But they said to me at the surgical center, man, you're awfully young for this procedure. We normally see guys in their 70s and 80s. So that made me feel bad. But I used my hips up. That's the point. I did everything I could to destroy these things. Not on purpose. I never thought, and I would see my friends getting their hips done, really top level competitors and people that, I fought against or fought with or trained with. And I think, man, I don't know how I dodged that bullet, but my hips feel great. And they did feel great all the way until I was about 50. And then bam, just out of nowhere, I was I thought I hurt myself demonstrating a kick. And maybe that's where it started, like a torn labrum or something. And I hadn't warmed up, and when you're 50, doing the same things that you've done forever, you just think you just keep going, and the body changes. That's the reality. Anyway, the point is, Bill said he had his hips done twice now. He's had them both done twice, I think. And his point was, he doesn't regret it, and he's going to kick until the day he dies, and he's going to kick you in your face. He's 70. I don't know what he is now. I think he was 73 when I was talking to him then. He was getting ready to do a fight with a guy who was like 75 up in Canada for like a charity, and they were gonna get in the ring and do 3 rounds and try to knock each other out. And I love that. I respect that. That's so inspiring to me, someone like that. But I'm not kicking anymore. I'm not kicking above my head anymore. I might kick you in the knee. I might kick you in the groin for self-defense if I had to. Might kick you in your thigh, break your upper leg, or try anyway. So the Muay Thai kicks, we'll keep them low. I'm not doing the spinning hook kicks, the jump kicks. I'm not doing that stuff anymore. The super high side kicks. And I say that now, who knows? I might get back into it and then realize, it feels pretty good, and then start doing it again. But starting with boxing, the second thing that I would do, I would tell my younger self and I would tell my older self, is you've got to know how to fight on the ground. You have to know how to stop somebody from taking you down. Shooting or sprawling, I don't know why I always call it shooting. Someone shoots against you, trying to take you to the ground, like a high school football player, high school wrestler, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Someone tries to take your legs out, pick you up, dump you on your head, ground and pound your face into the ground, or arm bar or choke you out or whatever. Then you need to know how to stop them from tackling to the ground, from taking you down. And that's called a sprawl, and that's a really basic thing. So getting into a martial art as a young person, like I said, I started in Judo, so I think that was covered, and then I got into wrestling in high school. That's definitely, if I had my younger self and I'm saying, okay, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're going to boxing, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you're going to be wrestling. And and where I came from in Ohio, wrestling is a major sport. There are wrestling gyms for kids everywhere, kids and adults. And more so than Judo. You can't find Judo almost anywhere anymore, but you can, but it's not as popular as other traditional martial arts. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you can get into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I respect it. I love it. I love the intricacy of it. I love how technical it is. I love the instructors are always really good guys, it seems. But wrestling, and I was talking to this about this with a cop recently who was a competitive wrestler in college. Wrestling makes you mentally very tough. So does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not saying it doesn't. But where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu will focus on a few techniques, and then, the whole class might just be learning how to manipulate something and make it work. You're going to throw up at the end of almost every good wrestling. Yeah, that was my experience. They're so physically demanding. That's why, like special forces, if you look at Navy SEALs and special forces, at the highest, the tier 1 guys, the Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, you're gonna find a lot of high school and college wrestlers in that group. It's just one sport that makes you so mentally tough. more so than almost anything else. The fencing makes you think quickly and problem solve fast, and wrestling makes you mentally tough. Plus, you learn how to fight on the ground. Now, the biggest difference between wrestling, Western wrestling, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that in wrestling, you never want to give him your chest. You don't want him to pin you to the ground with your back on the ground, your two shoulder blades, because then they'll tap you out. Where in, so you're always turning so that you give him your back, and you're trying to get the guy off the back of you, you pull his leg through, or you flip on him or whatever. Where if you do that in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player and you give him your back, he's gonna choke you out like that. So Western wrestlers, when they get into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they have to learn. Mo, Juve, it's good to see you. You've got to snap out of it. You got to stop giving him your back, and it just takes, for a smart kid, boy or girl, or whatever, or adult who's wrestled a lot, you can make the transition. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very easy for most wrestlers once they get past the instinct to give them your back. You never give them your back. But once you get past that, then you can do a lot of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I would have my younger self start with Western wrestling. And then at some point, sign up for some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes. But I get the foundation from Western wrestling. Now that's my opinion, that's my experience. Put in the comment section what you would do, what you think. You might be a BJJ instructor or practitioner, and you might have a different opinion. So put that in. And I'm not saying that one way is better than the other. It's not good, it's not bad, it's different. And if you take that approach to martial arts and self-defense, it's not good, it's not bad, it's different, and you can learn from each one, then you'll be unstoppable. The problem is getting stuck in thinking that there's just one way to do anything, and there's not. There's always multiple ways. All of our bodies are extremely different. My Taekwondo instructor, who I trained with the longest, was a brilliant, amazing martial artist who everybody recognized, whether they liked his personality and his business practices or not, knew that this guy was the real deal, legit, great martial artist. And he was 5 foot, I forget what he told people. I think he was either 5'1" or 4'9". He was and he was North Korean. North Koreans, because of the communists, starved all the people. There was not enough food to eat. So you got whole generations of Koreans, just like Guatemalans, who are like this tall. Now they're all super tall. Hey Doug, it's great to see you. Doug knows what I'm talking about. Doug's a long-time martial artist too. I see you do a lot of martial art. We're talking to each other. We're a lot of martial artists here in this chat today. And then again, I would love to have your, Mode is just a silly little boy. We're gonna ignore him. It's so stupid. He wants to challenge me, for those of you who might not see the chat. It's not a movie, man. I know you're watching me on a screen, but this is a discussion. It's not a movie. It doesn't work like that in the real world. It's called assault. You're probably 12, and I would be in big trouble. Anyway, in the comment section, put in the comment section what your opinions are, what your experience is, and what you think. You can put one word answer, yes, no. You can put a description, I think you're full of crap, or yeah, I never thought of it that way, or in my experience, and then write a book. I don't care, but put your experience in there, and let's learn from each other. I would start with boxing and wrestling, and then at some point, I was thinking about this. It's very important. Thank you, Alita. It's good to see you. Elbows. I love elbows for self-defense, especially like a reverse elbow, a spinning elbow, an elbow up, an elbow down, a jumping elbow, bringing it down on top of his head for self-defense. Thank you, Doug, so much. I really appreciate that super chat. But I love elbows, elbow strikes. Now, knee strikes, I like knee strikes too, but elbow strikes are really, you've got a black belt, I've got a black shirt, man. I think it's black. It's either black or like bluish gray. Ryan said he's got one too. He got it from a guy that makes them. Yeah. That brings us back to the old Karate Kid movie, which was such an iconic movie. That's the reason I got into martial arts in the first place. Mr. Miyagi talks about his black belt that he got from Sears or whatever. which is so true. And the greatest thing about Mr. Miyagi, that movie, The Karate Kid, the first one, and the original one, I saw, my son was watching with Jackie Chan. I love Jackie Chan and Will Smith's kid, and I just didn't care for it. I didn't, something about it, style wise, or, I'm not a Kung Fu fan. I love the old Kung Fu movies. I love Jackie Chan. I love Wushu because it's so acrobatic. It's beautiful. I love Capoeira, the Brazilian martial art. But the point about the black belt is, I wish when you rewatch these, everybody could see the, yeah, Ryan said it's this gun belt. Yeah, I have a 511, super stiff, that I carry when my concealed carry belt. And then I have another 511 for my duty belt, which is also very stiff. And yeah, Norman says he never liked the Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is, I think sometimes he's like, I can take him or leave him. Sometimes he's too goofy, and sometimes it's just the right amount, and sometimes it's like over the top. But you have to respect his athleticism. And we saw a movie with him recently. The dude's 70 years old, still doing his own stunts, and that's proof that if you stay in good shape. And I don't know if he's ever had a hip replacement or not, but my point is, what I was saying earlier was the Korean guy that I learned from, who was maybe 5 feet tall, but could do amazing kicks. His fists were as big as mine at 5 foot tall. And that's not an exaggeration. I think his moms were too. He had this, and they were all from North Korea and suffered horrific abuse from the communists, and lived in refugee camps for years. And he grew up in a refugee camp, so they were tough as nails. I mean, he was one of the toughest men, and could pick up any weapon, and was a master. Sorry, I keep getting interrupted here. Whether it was traditional Western wrestling or judo, jiu-jitsu, I would probably. Yeah, Joseph Foreigner is a good movie for sure. But elbows, how would I get the elbows in boxing and grappling and then Muay Thai? I think then you might mess yourself up. I think if you got a good solid foundation of boxing, maybe for a couple years, while you were also wrestling and grappling, and you start that a little bit after the boxing, I think boxing will get you out of most situations where you're gonna get in trouble, and then get into the grappling later, especially if you're gonna go into the military, or you're gonna be in law enforcement, or you feel like you really need practical self-defense. You have to know what to do if you get knocked to the ground, taken to the ground, caught off guard, and you're on the ground, and you have to know how to fight. So you have to know that. But for practical self-defense, for my older self, now this is what I'm thinking. I've been working on, I have all kinds of these lists where, yeah, Doug says Korean rocks were tough like no other. And the Rock Marines, I'm sure, Doug's Rock Army, Rock Marines, Rock SEALs, Republic of Korea's Rock ROK. These guys all cross-train in multiple styles, and they all know how to wrestle. And Koreans have Shidum, which is, it's kind of like sumo, but they're not as big. It's not like sumo. It's more like the Mongolian kind of wrestling, or because the Chinese kind of wrestling. But I think that, at my plan, as after this hip is fixed, after I have a new robot hip over here, and I don't have this constant pain that I'm living with and limitation, and I get back into teaching, and I reopen my martial arts school, and I focus more on adult and kid self-defense, but not martial arts. I'm not teaching traditional martial arts anymore. I'm gonna go back into the self-defense sides of things. Practical self-defense against bullies for the younger people, and against somebody who's trying to take your life. If you're a father, a mother, a grandfather, a grandmother, how do you keep your family safe? How do you keep yourself safe? Then my focus is going to be on hands, boxing, and some basic self-defense, stopping someone from taking you to the ground, learning how to sprawl, learning how to move to the side, learning how to spin a little bit if it's possible for you. If you have that limitation, you're not going to be able to do it. All within what are you capable of doing, right? What are your physical limitations and what's going to work? So with that practicality in mind, considering what you can do instead of, this template that everybody has to go through, think old school martial arts school where everybody's got to learn the same 40 forms, pumse, kata, whatever you want to call them. They all have to break the same brick or blocks or series of boards, demonstrate 3 different weapons, how to use a bow, how to use a nunchuck, all that stuff. I'm not going to do that anymore because I don't think it's relevant today. It was 30 years ago, and it was really important. It was really important to do that because that's all we knew. Yeah, Garen says call it personal safety training. I love that. I never thought of that. Personal safety training. I'm going to write it down. That's a great name. So if we talk about personal safety training or whatever we want to call it, boxing, how to move on your feet, and then elbows. And so we can take elbows, and there are a lot of styles of martial arts that use elbows, right? There are traditional karate elbows. Muay Thai, kickboxing probably has the best elbows. And then there's like the KZ methods where there's some great covers and some things in fighting that you can take these things from. And it's not necessarily Krav Maga, because I think you still have to have a little bit more, like in Krav Maga, the line guys up, got men and women, and then they have to fight to the back. And it's almost like a short, like a little snippet of like the 100-man kumite that you find in Kyokushin karate, where they're just beating the snot out of each other. But it's the same thing in the 100-man kumite. They're kicking in the head, you can get knocked out, but they're not punching in the face. And when someone starts throwing a punch in your face, starts throwing their fist in your face, everything changed. It's that Mike Tyson, I don't know if he really said it or they just attribute it to him, but that saying, everybody's got a plan until I punch him in the mouth or punch him in the face. And then your plan just falls apart. And there was another famous boxer, and I'm not going to remember exactly who it was. And he was just a reporter. And the reporter was asking him, you fought against this guy. He was younger, he was stronger, he was faster. He was the one that we all thought was going to win, right? All the odds were against you fighting this guy, and he had the best training. We all went to his training camp and saw what he was doing, and we thought you were going to be in big trouble. What were you thinking, or how did you beat this guy? And he says something like, the whole time this guy's thinking about his strategy, and he's thinking about his plan, and he's thinking about this and what he's going to do after that. He said, I was punching him in the face. The whole time he's thinking, I'm punching him in the face. He said, I beat him because he's thinking and I'm just punching him in the face. And so if you learn how to survive that and move with that and take a hit and keep going and realize it's not the end of the world when you get punched in the face, that you can keep fighting, and then learn some basic elbows because those can end a fight very quickly. And then sticks. I want to teach people how to fight with sticks because I firmly believe sticks and improvised devices for non-permissive environments, having a force multiplier. Because as we get older, we have to realize, like, if I can't hit you like I did when I was 28, I just can't. I don't have that kind of strength and speed and power. But if I pick up this is I'm sitting in my wife's office. That's why we're turning the other way, seeing this yellow fancy stuff on the wall. This is just a tape thing, and I don't know what it's made out of, but it's heavy. It's extremely heavy. And if I put this in my hand and I smash you in the face with it, it's going to be very effective for self-defense. It's probably going to knock most people out, or it'll at least knock your teeth down your throat. This is made in China. What isn't, right? But this heavy thing, or swing line stapler, open this thing up. Maybe you want to hold it in the middle so it doesn't collapse on your hand, or keep it closed. Now you've got a weighted fist, you got a fist load. You can jab with it, you can stick it in his eye. I might have to pick up this pin, right? And use this pin to stop somebody who's stronger, faster, and trying to take my life. There's a pair of scissors there. I don't even need to show you that. Scissors are a little too obvious. But the point is, what I would do if I had to, letter opener, Orion says, if I had to start over, so Doug's asking, would I incorporate cane training? 1,000% yes. Every stick, starting with the walking stick, the Yawara, the palm stick, the Tanbo, the handheld stick. So as a younger person, I don't know that it would be so important to, although I would teach improvised tools. But when you're young, your life is so different. Now, if I were working with a group of people who are challenged physically, I would teach them how to fight with a cane, with their walker, with anything and everything they have to kind of level the playing field. for self-defense. And if I had to learn self-defense over, starting with what I know and my experience in my life, starting over for me in a real way after I get this other hip replaced, getting back into a position where I'm not in pain all the time and I have some of my limitations gone, I get my mobility back and I can move fast again, I'm going to box, I'm going to throw elbows, I'm going to practice going to the ground and getting back up on my feet, stopping someone from taking me down, fighting on the ground and getting back up on the feet. And then when I work with you, we're going to work on the same kinds of things. Now, some people will not be able to go to the ground. You might be confined to a wheelchair. You might have real physical limitations where you can't go to the ground and get back up. Then I'm going to teach you how to stand leaning on your cane or leaning against the wall or being able to move out of the way so you don't get knocked to the ground, and what to do in that case. And if you were knocked to the ground, how do we survive that? So whatever the limitation is, we're going to work within that. That's something that was never really addressed, but I did, because I had a lot of students. I had kids with dwarfism go all the way up 6 years, 7 years, I think it took him to get his black belt. Never quit. He kept going. Yeah, Ryan says he's in a power chair now. So if that's your reality, that's your reality. And that's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. So how do we address it? And we don't have to call it adaptive or alternative or disabled or anything. It's just your reality. So if that's your reality, just like I was saying before, the Korean guy was this tall, he could do all these things. And I remember so clearly, he was surrounded by especially men and one woman who were really high ranking, who had been with him for 30 years at that point. And he just passed a couple years ago. They're still there. So it would be 50 years by now. And they would, in private conversations, they would feel inferior to him because they didn't look the same way. One man had polio as a child. Literally, his left arm was completely lame, and he would tuck it into his black belt, and he would beat the snot out of people. He'd go to tournaments and win the grand championship. And he would beat everybody. One leg was like 4 or 5 inches shorter than the other one. But he always felt inferior to the Korean guy because he didn't look like him. But he would never look like him. That's my point. I'm never going to look like that guy. You're never going to look like me. We're never going to look like each other. And that's the beauty of self-defense training and martial arts and boxing and everything else. Is we're not supposed to. We're all made differently. Some of us are in a power chair now. And if that's your reality, you still, from where you are, you can make some progress and move forward. So that would be the mental part of it, right? Just acknowledging that I don't know, you don't know, God knows. And so none of us are going to put a limitation on what you can do. Let's just get out there and train. And what does that training look like? Well, if you can't do this because you have real shoulder issues and you can only do this, how do we fight right here, right? If you're confined to a chair, how do you fight from here? If you need a cane to lean on, how do you fight that way? If none of those are your limitations, and you can stand up and you can move and you can improve your flexibility, you can move side to side. Boxing includes all the footwork that anybody needs to effectively defend themselves. Lateral movement, diagonal movement, and then moving front and forward to knock somebody out and back to get out of the way. That's all you really need for practical self-defense. All of the fancy cut steps and all the cool things that we did, and back in the day when I was younger, and jump spins and all that stuff's cool and fun. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying for practical self-defense, this is about not what I would do in martial arts if I were starting over, but how would I, if I had to relearn, restart, or I never did it before, and I was talking to my younger self, and I wanted something that really worked and was practical. Boxing, grappling, especially Western wrestling, and then eventually some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And even that, I don't think it's extremely important that you get the BJJ in there. I think it's effective, it's highly effective, and it does really work. But I think you're not gonna find many guys who know how to wrestle who are gonna be like, oh, I wish I knew BJJ because I don't know what to do. Those guys all know how to handle themselves. If somebody tries to tackle them and take them to the ground, they're gonna choke you out too, right? They're not gonna not know how to fight. The wrestling guys, they all know how to fight. So that's my experience. What do you think? Put that in the comment section. share the video, get other people to comment, send it to other martial artists that you know. And like I said, I'm not always right. I just know what I know in my experience. Oh yeah, Garen says one of the things that you would have to teach everybody eventually is safe falling technique. That comes from, Judo. First week of Judo practice was falling. First week of wrestling was falling. First week of Aikido that I took was falling. Every Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class I've ever been in, they start with moving across the floor and not necessarily falling all the time, but starting from a position where you could fall forward or fall back. And so that's extremely important. But so I would cover that with the Garen. I'd cover that with the jiu-jitsu part of it. I would work in elbows, not as a kid, not for my younger self, but for my future self as I get older. I want you to leverage what you've got, and elbows are extremely powerful. Like I said, I'm not necessarily, I don't need to do knees anymore. And then sticks, all kinds of sticks, canes. I'd still do the bow staff. I love the long staff. Doug asked, would I do partner stuff? I am going to actively try to find some adults who are willing to learn self-defense from me and be in these videos so that we can start to make this a true global dojo, where like a virtual dojo where we can learn with each other, and you can see it working with me to somebody and then somebody against me, because I'm a big guy and it's easy. There's a video on LinkedIn from one of the self-defense guys I follow. It's actually executive protection or close protection, they call them overseas. And they were showing in, I think it's Sweden, they had a doctor swinging, I think it was his lab coat. He was swinging his lab coat, and then they had a nurse, a woman, with a giant kitchen knife coming at him, pretending like she was trying to stab him. And she was like covering her face because he was hitting her in the eyeballs with it. And I don't know if you've ever had anybody smack you in the face with cloth. It hurts, right? Especially if there's little buttons on it or a zipper. And so she's covered up, and it's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but they were showing this is what they're teaching the Swedish doctors, because they have so many people coming off the street attacking them with knives in the hospitals. They're teaching them how to stay. Oh yeah, Garen says how to use a belt too. That would fall into, when I say sticks and knives, I wrote down improvised weapons. So anything and everything, the tape machine, the stapler, your belt, especially the 511 belts that I wear now. I made a video here about a year ago saying I wouldn't use a belt for self-defense because the way we always used them was to like trap and pull and take the guy down and all that stuff. And that works, right? But I don't want you to learn fancy moves. I want you to learn practical, fast moves. The belt that I carry now, that I wear now, has a big metal buckle, and I would take that off and swing that at anybody, and that'd rip you up, and it, push somebody back. Or if I pulled it in half, it would almost be like hitting them with something a little bit more substantial. So yeah, belt, keys, whatever. I teach throwing, right hand, left hand. If you had to pick up a rock and hit somebody with it, or a can of beans while you're in a grocery store and there's an active situation happening, you need to defend yourself, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Doug says the rat tail towel. That brings me back to wrestling in the locker room after every wrestling football practice. Why do guys do that? Because the towels are always thin, cheap towels, and smacking each other while everybody's getting in and out of the shower. That was one part of being a middle and a high school boy that I could have skipped, but everybody seems to go through that. Marine Corps did it too, except they're green, skinny little towels. And then in the Army, they're brown. Guys are still doing it in the Army. So, when they're older, it's just ridiculous. That's our nature, toxic masculinity. Hoorah. Anyway, I don't know if you guys have seen that commercial that's floating out there right now, but it's pretty funny. I'll say no more because I don't upset anybody. But anyway, I just found it funny. I'm not taking a side one or the other. I just thought it was hilarious. Please, in the comment section, put down, what would you do if you had to start over? If you're an experienced martial artist, or you've been defending yourself for years, or you have an opinion about it, or if you're just getting started. What has your research said to you? What do you think sounds best, what makes the most sense. Doug, thanks again for that super sticker, that super chat. I really appreciate that. Please help me reconnect this channel. I think doing the videos in the vertical really destroyed the channel for a little bit. It's weird, it pulls in the wrong people. I was getting a lot of really nasty people in the chat. So I'm not gonna do those anymore. From now on, we're going with the widescreen, and we're gonna kind of reconnect. I'm gonna tape some again, and like Doug said, we're gonna get some partners in here so I can show you, what it looks like when you're working with somebody. And then always reach out to me. My email is my last name, pasquinelli@hotmail.com, or Gmail, either one of those work, or info@quantumstrong.com. And if you have an opinion, if you have something you want to share, or you have a question or request, just let me know. Garen says he likes this format. I do too. I think I only went to the other format because I only do things that when I'm forced to do them, right? When I had that microphone that I put on my shirt and connect when I'm in the garage, because the sound is so bad, the weight of it pulls the camera, because I use the magnet on the back of the camera, so it pulls it into that vertical. So that's why I've been doing the vertical. So I'll just go back to using the tripod. I'm using the tripod right now, and I think that'll fix it. Thanks, Joe. Joe says, thankful to find you, 61 and in transition now. Thanks, Joe. Put that in the comment. What do you think about the things that we talked about today? Yeah, we're all going through changes, right? We're kids, young, getting started. Our past self, our present self, whatever our realities are now, things aren't working like they used to. We don't like it, but there's nothing we can do about it except, put your helmet on, pull up your big boy pants, big girl pants, knuckle up, buttercup, and keep moving, because the alternative is horrible. Just sitting down and giving up and quitting is not an option. It's not an option for me. I know it's not an option for you. So as we go through these changes, these transitions, if you had to start martial arts over, if you had to start self-defense over, where would you start? What would you do differently, knowing now what you knew then? Awesome. Yeah. Joe said he bought some Dows today. Doug says amen. Amen is the truth. That's the truth. We just keep going, keep fighting, live to fight another day. I lost, some of you guys had seen some of the videos I had with Bo. Bo was deaf. He read lips, and we would work out 3 times a week over the phone. Actually, I had a device on the wall with a camera, and he would be in his basement in Ohio, and I was down here in Florida. We did that for 4 or 5 years. And I talked to him one Friday. He just had a procedure on some arteries, and that had some blockage, and something he had done before, just a simple thing. Went home, took a nap, never woke up. And I think of him all the time. And I think, he went till the day he worked out until he couldn't work out anymore. I mean, literally. And, if it hadn't been for that, we'd still be working out. And I learned more from him than he learned from me. But what I learned, because he went through, he lost his hearing. He had lost his hearing years back, and then got some of it back with a hearing aid, and then went completely deaf. And then he was having other physical challenges and issues. But he always found a way to do something. And I was inspired by that. So you can find a way to do something. Yeah, and may he rest in peace. Now, he's such a good guy, and he helped a lot of people, and he was a good dad. His kids would tell you, everybody knew him, he was a good guy, and he was a force. He was just somebody who, in spite of all the challenges he had his whole life, he just kept pushing forward, and never trying to take anything from anybody else, but just trying to build himself up and learn and understand what was happening around him from his unique perspective. And that was also so informative to me, because we all have our unique perspective. And when we recognize that we're not all the same. There's this saying that, we're all in the same boat. And I'm reminded constantly, we're all in the same storm. We're all in the same ocean, but we're all in different boats. Some of us are on a big aircraft carrier. Some are on a luxury yacht. Some are in a little dinghy. Some are in a canoe. Some are on a stand-up paddleboard. Some of us are just barely treading water with no life vest, And that we're tasting the salt water and it's stinging our eyes and we don't know if we're going to make it or not. And that's our reality. Once we recognize that about ourselves, we can see that in other people and say, quit having such strong opinions. Who cares? Learn how to get along with each other, learn how to value each other, learn how to be kind to one another. And when you need to, learn how to defend yourself. And because there's going to be a real need to do that at some point in your life. And if there's not, and you're just ready and you can be an inspiration to somebody else, you can teach somebody else because they have a similar challenge to yours, not the same, but a similar, then there's a lot of value in that too. Anyway, you guys have been awesome. I really appreciate you being here. Please, in the comment section, if you can, write down what your thoughts are. If you were to answer the same question, if I had to start over, how would I learn self-defense now? Not fighting, or you can think of it that way. If I were a kid, how would I learn self-defense? Because it's not the same thing. And for some people, it might be. It might be life or death if you're young. But for most young people, it's usually ego. For us old people, it could be life or death. So what would you do differently? And maybe it's just self-defense against getting old. How do you defend against that? I mean, you can't completely stop it, but you can mitigate it and you can get stronger and get better. Anyway, you guys have been awesome. Thanks again, Doug, for that super chat. I'll see you guys in a little bit.